Our game Xoth Ball was directed towards kids with Down syndrome. Research shows that children with Down syndrome learn better with illustrations, such as pictures, gestures, or objects. In Xoth Ball, by being able to see and choose where the ball will go after being hit, these children will better understand how the different materials alter the speed of the ball. The use of visual aids, audio tapes, and computer games, as well as other concrete materials, help maintain the attention and interest of the student. These mechanisms are all included in Xoth Ball as sounds, visuals, and the game itself. Also, motor skills are slower to develop in those with Down syndrome. Xoth Ball helps build up this skill with the action of hitting the space bar at the appropriate time so the baseball player in the game will hit the ball.
We were faced with several constraints. One was a limited selection of game development software, given Kodu, Scratch, and GameMaker. We chose GameMaker, which has freedoms and some constraints. Another was to appeal to the abilities and interests of individuals with Down syndrome. Finally, we were limited to approximately 2 months of work to complete the project. For the brainstorming step of the design process, we came up with several ideas, such as a Diner Dash game, Game Design Tycoon, baseball/physics puzzle, and wildlife construction. We ultimately chose to do the baseball puzzle game because we believed it would be the most effective, especially to appeal to individuals with Down syndrome, and it would be easy to create. For the planning stage, we developed the level design. The batter stands on a platform. There were 3 bats made of different materials that had different effects to choose from to teach the material science. The player also chooses which direction the ball will go. The ball is shot from a pitching machine, and the player would try to hit the space ball early enough to hit the ball. The goal of each level is to hit the ball into a glove using the correct bat and direction. For the creation stage of the design cycle, we created the first 2 levels. Each level has 3 bats, and the player can choose to hit the ball in 3 directions. The baseball glove is placed at different parts of each level for the player to hit the ball into. After all this, we drafted and built the subsequent levels.
The testing phase of the design process consisted of fixing several problems in the game. Some of these problems included programming issues such as collision and sound issues. Another problem was the game not being long enough to meet the minimum time length requirement of 5 minutes. To fix this, we simply added more levels. Some improvements made to Xoth Ball were the addition of levels, fixing sound issues with the plastic bat, adding different types of boundaries such as wood and rubber to the field, and the addition of an introductory tutorial on how to play the game.
On the day of the FEDD presentation, our group set up a laptop with our game, Xoth Ball. During the FEDD, several people stopped by our group's table in order to test play our game. The general response we received from the player base was positive feedback and suggestions about our game. So the suggestions that were made includes, but is not limited to, different images and sprites for the game, more levels to play, and possibly better gameplay mechanics. Despite the responses, our group did not manage to place at FEDD presentation. However, we placed out of the lower outlier group among the educational video game group.
From a gameplay perspective, the batting mechanic could have been modified to accommodate a free choice of direction chosen by the player. In this manner, the player would be able to select their own path in reaching the target mitt. Secondly, an animated power gauge could have been implemented, allowing for varying power ranges depending on bat type. In its initial stages, the player would be able to adjust the power level of their swing, giving he or she control over the ball's initial velocity. However, due to mechanic and coding restraints, the final version excluded this idea for a simplified assigned power value to each different bat. Thus, the integration of this mechanic would have allowed for a more player-controlled environment, enhancing the educational aspects behind gameplay. Third, while the game boasted a visually decent aesthetic, sprites and animations could have been improved in order to enhance visual appeal, fully immersing the player in the game's world. Finally, incorporating all of these aforementioned changes would allow for greater freedom in designing levels. Here, the freedom of direction and power level would allow for a greater range in multipath options for the player. One of the toughest issues we faced in terms of group dynamics was the primary decision to build our game first before researching a potential audience. Originally, our design process started by deciding on a game idea and then researching Down syndrome qualities as they pertain to enhancing learning and interest. While this decision did not significantly impact the mechanics of the game, it did lessen the effectiveness of the material science engineering aspects we intended to teach the player. Had we researched the qualities of Down syndrome first, our game would have better taught material science engineering to our intended audience. Further, by having researched example games made using the GameMaker engine, we could have discovered extended coding scripts that would have aided in programming more efficient and effective bat hitting and ball rebound mechanics. While we ultimately achieved the intended direction of our game, the majority of our work was completed within the last few weeks before FEDD, minimizing our time for testing and improvements. Having started earlier, we could have identified and expanded upon potential problems like the ball and bat mechanics that could have improved the game's performance. Overall, our tendency to not evenly distribute the expected workload affected our productivity. Often, work assigned to a few people in order to lessen stress ultimately fell on the individual who specialized in that particular area. As a result, parts of the game were not completed until late into development, again, limiting potential work time. Had we structured our time more effectively, we could have been able to allow for extended periods of testing and improvements.
Through our overall experience, we've gathered some advice for upcoming freshmen regarding the FEDD project. One of the most common tips given is improving time management, but there's a bit more to it than that. Primarily, this project is one that requires groups to work together outside the classroom environment. As such, you and your team should make times for meetings to check up on progress and allocate tasks. This sounds tedious, but it is necessary to avoid time crunching at the last minute. On the note of time crunching, another key component is spacing out work. It's not fun to give yourself more work on the project when it's only in semester, but it is worth noting that your other classes will pick up speed as the semester goes on, and it's even more troublesome to manage your time then, and you and your group should definitely keep that in mind. Another piece of advice we can offer is remember to read the rubric. This sounds obvious, but even if you think you know everything a project needs, you may still miss something, or think certain things are less important than others, resulting in missed points. Finally, one of the most important pieces of advice that can be given for this project is to keep you and your group motivated. If even one person no longer feels motivated to put out quality work, it affects the entire project. So, it's in everyone's best interest to keep the morale up.